destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hello, everyone. This is Andy Steele. Glad to be back for another show, and this is a special one. It's our 4th of July program, airing, of course, on No Lies Radio on the holiday, and we are going to be joined by 2 prominent members of AE 9/11 Truth, one of whom is Richard Gage, AIA, and the other is Pam Senzee. We'll be talking about a number of things, including the Rethink 9/11 campaign, as well as other issues and other things that AE 9/11 Truth will be doing in the following year, and what you can do to make this the year of America's second revolution. And this is a revolution that will not be fought with bullets, but with words and facts. And unlike the first American Revolution, this one is being televised. Stay tuned, I'll explain that more, and we'll get to those guests very shortly. Now, if this is the first episode of this show you're tuning into, this show is about 9/11 Truth, with a focus on the science of 9/11 Truth, and it's about introducing you to the people who are out there acting as the true patriots of the 21st century, and who are alerting the masses that the post-9/11 world is based on a lie. That the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7 were brought down in a pre-planned controlled demolition on 9/11. The science proves this, folks, and that science has been outlined by a number of experts and scholars, most prominently by one of our guests today, Richard Gage, who has been all over the world laying it out and building the army of activists that are now rising and rocking the nothing to see here parrot media and political establishment to their cores. Folks, patriots are not simply old men in white wigs that you see in paintings and who you have to memorize the names of when you're in school. All right, patriots are the people in any age speaking out and doing what's right in defense of our nation, even and especially when it's difficult to do so. The organization, which I mention every week on this show, is Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. The people at AE 9/11 Truth, from the most acclaimed scholars laying out the technical evidence to the most ordinary layman who knows from his or her common sense that the official story can't be true, are some of the most dedicated people in the world. Knowing that living in this world is about more than just chasing the latest fad and cherishing frivolities, but stepping up and taking responsibility for correcting the course when things go horribly wrong. And folks, things have gone horribly wrong. All right, government and media have been allowed to deny reality and slip the crime of the century under the rug. They've been allowed to use it to justify a number of agendas. And for them, this 4th of July is nothing other than a spectacle with which to whip you up into a blind nationalistic frenzy. But I know that you know better than to let yourself be swayed by a propaganda sideshow. You know something's wrong. Many things are wrong, and you know at the core of the problems is this obvious lie about what destroyed the buildings in New York on 9/11. The 4th of July is not about superficial symbols and fireworks, all right? Not in times like these. The 4th of July is about invoking the courage of your forefathers and speaking out with a powerful voice that says you will no longer stand the tyranny of an enormous lie and that we are declaring independence from it. All right, let this be the day that you decide to fight back. You need to go to AE911truth.org right now to volunteer and tell them what you can do to restore America once again, because, folks, we'll only be really free when the truth sets us free. So I said the second American Revolution is on, and it is being televised and broadcast on the radio, too, I guess. Before we get to our guests, I'm going to go over the latest 9/11 related news, and it starts with this from a few weeks ago. 9/11 truth callers have persisted in getting questions about the controlled demolition evidence to representatives and pundits who wanted to stop by C-SPAN's Washington Journal program for their usual chit-chat and flattery sessions with the hosts. Now, those calls are featured in the latest compilation video I have up at 911freefall.com, so you can watch those, but I'm going to play the last call in that video. And this is a question to the European Union ambassador to the U.S. His name is Joao Valde-Almeida, if I'm pronouncing it right. And this is a question about Ferdinando Impastato, who is the Italian Supreme Court president, who has openly come out and said he agrees with Richard Gage's evidence and is calling for a criminal investigation of 9/11. But listen to the host Steve Scully's reaction.
Let's get to your phone calls. John is joining us from Youngstown, Florida, Republican line. Good morning.
Good morning. My question is, since the Italian Supreme Court President Fernando Impazzamato has called for a criminal investigation of 9/11 and agrees with the scientific evidence that explosives must have been used to bring down the buildings in New York, would the EU be open to conducting its own new 9/11 investigation?
Hey, John, before we get a response, we had an earlier caller on this, and we know that there is a concerted effort to flood the airwaves with these calls. We ask that you go to another network or another place. We've heard from you in the past.
Please don't interrupt me.
I am going to interrupt you because it's off topic, and we've had a number of people calling in. We had a caller earlier this morning with the same point who basically disputed everything that is being called on this question, but you and others continue to call in, so we ask that you choose another network or another venue. We made the comment earlier. You're certainly welcome to respond as well, but we ask that you take your calls somewhere else.
I have no comments on that particular question.
We'll go to Barry.
So Steve Scully claims that the question is off topic, but listen to him earlier in the same interview talking about the conference that the ambassador had just attended with President Obama.
In our conversation with the European Union ambassador to the United States, let's share with you some of the comments from President Obama as he finished up his meeting in Northern Ireland, then traveled to Berlin and talked about, among other issues at his speech at the Brandenburg Gate, the issue of terrorism and the NSA activities here in the U.S. and in Europe. Here's more from the president.
Even as we remain vigilant about the threat of terrorism, we must move beyond the mind.
So it's not off topic. Steve Scully mentioned terrorism himself during the interview. He must have before thought it was relevant to play that Obama clip, and certainly an inquiry into what happened during the biggest alleged terrorist event in history is on topic. So the issue here is not really how the question relates to what's being discussed, but rather how uncomfortable it makes Steve Scully feel when he hears the question. And I said it before, folks, C-SPAN fronts is some kind of platform for free speech, provided that you stay within the confines they set down on you. But in reality, it's more like a customer service phone center. It's a way of making you feel that your opinion is quote-unquote valued as a customer of this nation while the machine running things keeps marching on with whatever it wants to do. So, it's funny, because my video went on the net, and it was on InfoWars. Thank you to the people there for posting it. And anybody with any intelligence would realize that Steve Scully didn't really look good telling viewers to not call into a show that is based on inviting people to call in. And it's funny, too, if you actually watch the video to the very end, I have clips in there of Mr. Scully himself, along with another host, saying that we welcome the conversation. We don't have a policy of not wanting to answer questions about Building 7. And then in the last clip, obviously, he's telling you that to not call in. So it's hypocritical, and it's right in your face. So that goes on the net. It's watched by a lot of people. So the next time that they got a 9/11 controlled demolition question, here is what happened.
Revolution has come to fruition.
Anthony, Kingston, New York, Republican caller.
Yeah, I was wondering how the people in the government can take such time and care in setting up programs to spy on Americans, but not take time to open a basic physics book and realize that the 105 feet of acknowledged free fall of Building 7 on 9/11 would be impossible unless explosives were used to bring it down.
Congressman Duffy, your thoughts? I mean, there are people out there that have that viewpoint. There's been an organized effort by some in this group to call into our show and talk about that issue. What's your take on it?
I don't buy into a conspiracy theory on 9/11 where some inside job took down the Twin Towers. But with regard to the NSA, there's a lot of us who have many concerns about the NSA program and its impact on Americans and the balance between giving our federal government tools to protect Americans from potential terrorists, but also then our civil liberties and our rights. And there's always a balancing act that we have to do. From what I've seen, I think there's been an overreach right now with regard to the NSA into our civil liberties, and we have to figure out how we get this back into balance where Americans' information is still protected, and we still have tools in the federal government to protect us from terrorists.
For viewers that are interested in where these callers are coming from, the website is Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Cecile, Potomac, Maryland, Democrat.
And what you don't see on the radio, folks, is that they showed an image of AE911truth.org. And notice now that the tone has changed. The host has a very neutral, respectful sound in her voice. Folks, the Second American Revolution is on. And don't think for a moment that this happened because C-SPAN felt guilty or because they suddenly saw the light. All right, they're doing damage control, and they're hoping that you out there feel appeased and shut up. Well, don't shut up, all right? Keep calling in. The phone numbers for Washington Journal are still at 911freefall.com, and they're going to be in the archive at No Lies Radio. So write out your question ahead of time so you're not nervous and you're factual, and do what you need to do to get the evidence out there to the ears of America and potentially to your representatives if they choose to listen to you. All right, so don't be afraid to call in. Now, finally, activists are not limiting the revolution just to C-SPAN. Listen to this clip from NPR's show Talk of the Nation last week.
TOTN. And let's go to Bob. Bob with us from Gainesville.
Thank you, Neil. I find that the Edward Snowden case has certainly been the talk of the nation, but the underlying issues behind this are very much interesting to me and many others. The idea as to whether or not what the government is doing in encroaching on our civil liberties and reading into our phone lines and whatnot, whether or not that is done in the name of security, is a very interesting discussion. I feel that we should not trade our liberties for security. And, of course, the precedent for this was 9/11. Many might fear that we might have another 9/11 attack. And 9/11 being the false flag attack that it was, with Building 7 being a building 47 stories tall that fell in free fall speed in a matter of seconds, was not hit by any other airplane.
I see we have a truther with us.
Yes, well, I think that's a very derogatory term, and perhaps on your last show...
It's derogatory because you're talking scientific nonsense. I'm sorry to upbraid you. I am sorry to upbraid you. I am sorry to upbraid you. Please, I try to listen with respect to callers, except when they have their facts flat wrong.
You think Building 7 is not a very telling incident, sir? I
think it fell for different reasons, and the scientific community agrees with me. Well, more to the point, I agree with them. What do I know about Building 7?
Well, the architects and engineers all are in a consensus.
No, they are not, Bob, and I'm sorry.
Yes, there's a group called Architects and Engineers.
Bob, I'm hanging up on you because this is nonsense. Thank you. Let's move right along.
All right, and there you heard it, folks. Now, I think Neil Conan's own words sum it up. What do I know about Building 7? Yeah, buddy, that's the point. What do you know? My God, I would say about 75% of getting past the media wall is just getting past the egos of the people in it. All right? They get flattered by this establishment and put on a pedestal for towing the company line, but there's really no substance to their opinions. They have no clue. All right, now the caller here says free fall speed. It's actually free fall acceleration. But overall, he's right. All right, with Building 7, it's like asking a person who finds a decapitated body to defend why he thinks the victim didn't die of natural causes. All right, well, the research and details are important, and that's why AE911 Truth drives it home. It also needs to be stated that some things are just clear if you use your brain and trust your own judgment. And Building 7 is like that. All right, show me another steel frame high-rise that completely falls like that wasn't controlled demolition. I mean, give me a break. All right, what we're going to do now is what we do most weeks. We're going to take about 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of September 11th and their families, and everybody who has fallen in the wars that followed 9/11. And we're going to do that right now. Okay, we are joined by Richard Gage and Pamela Senzee. Richard Gage is the founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He's a Bay Area architect with decades of experience and a member of AIA. He's been on the show a couple of times before, and he's been getting the word out, tirelessly spreading the evidence about this important crime since 2007. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you, Andy, and for having this critically important information on your show.
And Pam Senzee is an activist with AE911 Truth. She rode her bike across the country along with Rita Patty last year to spread the controlled demolition evidence. She's filed a complaint with the FBI. We had her on here to talk about that. And if you remember last week, she was on to talk about her meeting with other activists and experts with Senator John McCain's office. Welcome back, Pam.
Thank you, Andy.
Now, Richard, I always try to keep in mind that we have new listeners to this program and maybe people who've never heard the evidence before. They may not even know that this issue exists. So can you briefly introduce yourself a little further to our listeners and go over the facts regarding the controlled demolitions of the buildings in New York on 9/11?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I represent 1,900 architects and engineers who have signed a petition. They're calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the Twin Towers, and particularly the third tower that we've been talking about on this show earlier. And this is incredibly important information for every American. As you have begun to highlight, I began to research this information 6 years ago when I heard on the radio Dr. David Ray Griffin, a researcher of 9/11 and an author of 9 books on the subject, or more than 9 books now. He was talking about the complete wholesale shattering of the structures of all 3 of these buildings and at virtually free fall acceleration. This is amazing. I mean, when I saw this building coming down, Building 7, a 47-story skyscraper not hit by an airplane, come down in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition, I knew what it was. And every architect and engineer who looks at it knows what it is. In fact, every child who looks at it knows what it is. An organic collapse, some sort of natural gravitational pancaking style collapse would take time to fall through 40,000 tons of structural steel. That's 3 to 5 times stronger than it needed to be to hold that building up. So people know that steel had to have been cut systematically, synchronistically timed, floor by floor, on at least 8 floors, in order to fall like a house of cards at free fall. Free fall means no resistance from any of the 80 columns in those buildings for at least 8 floors, because that was the period of free fall. 2/3 of this building's fall was at free fall. Now, once architects and engineers see this, they get it, they end up agreeing with it, they end up signing our petition. The trick has been to show them, to get them the evidence in front of them, to get them to our presentations, which we have done around the world in 27 countries and 80 American cities, to groups of 100 to 300. And the results are overwhelming, over 95% usually, and the audience ends up agreeing with us, and maybe 1 or 2 at the most of people end up sticking to the story. Some people cannot conceive the implications of the controlled demolition. We get that. I had a very rough awakening, if you will, 6 years ago myself, when confronted with basically the lies of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who claimed that this building came down by normal office fires, responsible for the destruction of 400 structural steel connections per second. It's just inconceivable that could happen. It's as if a fire hose is spraying a sandcastle, destroying it. That's the level of force that would be required to take out these columns. And in fact, the evidence of such force is quite apparent in the official reports by FEMA that came out in May of 2002. They're documenting the evidence of what can only be high-temperature incendiaries, including sulfur in temperatures that are responsible for melting steel, with molten iron invading the steel pieces, with the author of the FEMA report, Jonathan Barnett, a fire protection engineer, citing that the ends of these beams look like they were evaporated. It takes 4,000 degrees to evaporate steel. It takes 2,800 degrees to melt steel. But office fires can only get to be about 500 or 600 degrees. So when I'm hearing these inconsistencies between reality, the behavior of the building, the evidence of incendiaries, and the official report, which has promulgated the myth that this building came down by normal office fires, I know we have a problem. And I couldn't stand and do nothing. I had to pull together the other architects and engineers in my industry and say, hey, we got to do something about this. We have had the wool pulled over our eyes with respect to this third tower. Well, what about the other two towers? So we then turned our attention to the Twin Towers and found all kinds of evidence for the wholesale, complete, catastrophic shattering of that structure in about 12 seconds, both structures. Almost free-fall acceleration, starting with not a pancaking collapse like we're told, not 12 stories above the point of jet plane impacts in the case of the North Tower, driving the rest of the building down to the ground, but basically the controlled demolition of that upper 12 stories in just 4 seconds. After that, it's completely gone almost, and it is not capable of driving the rest of those structures, in the case of the North Tower, the rest of the way down to the ground. In the case of the South Tower, 30 stories would have tipped. It began tipping. It would have fallen off onto the ground and mangled in some heap. But no, it has a complete symmetrical destruction all the way down the face of these structures, like a belt, like the first responders. Over 118 of them described massive series of explosions wrapping all the way around the building like a belt, seeing flashes of light. This is all very well documented in the peer-reviewed paper by Graham McLean at Journal of 9/11studies.com. Also on our website, we have 43 structural engineers, high-rise architects, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, etc., laying out this evidence on our DVD, 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. This is a DVD played on PBS.org and having become the most watched and most viewed video during the month of September. So it's very, very well laid out, and it includes the evidence of incendiaries found in the World Trade Center dust in a 4-inch pile of powder from river to river, with the evidence of very high temperature, molten iron droplets, 2,800 degrees it takes to create these 10 tons of droplets found by the USGS, but unexplained in all the World Trade Center dust, also found by an international team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen, these curious red-gray chips in the 4 independently collected samples that they studied. And these are extremely high-tech nanothermite incendiaries, which can only be made in the most sophisticated defense contracting laboratories. So not only the evidence of the buildings in their behavior on the videos gives it away, including the lateral ejection of 4-ton perimeter wall units landing 600 feet away, ejected 60 miles an hour out of each of the Twin Towers in a geometry of fireworks with upward-outward path of these objects trailed by pyroclastic-like smoke clouds, but also the bands of explosions and isolated explosive ejections occurring up to 60 stories below the so-called pancaking collapse. It's all a dead giveaway, and to any American willing to look at the evidence, it is very clear. And so I couldn't turn back. I had to do everything I can to wake up my fellow Americans because of the implications Okay, it's one thing to lie to the American people about the destruction of 3 buildings, but when you realize what else is being covered up here, it's a much darker picture that every American must begin to face, or we will end up in a place that we don't want to be. And I'm sure you guys have more information about that eventuality than I do.
Yeah, and I'm sure many people would say that we are in a place we didn't want to be, at least in relation to 11 years ago, and it's even getting darker and darker. Now, Pam, thanks for coming back on. I know we had you on last week. You're so involved in all the great things happening at AE, and your voice needs to be part of this episode. So tell our audience, for yourself, because you put a lot of energy into exposing this. Obviously, you're convinced by the evidence. What do you consider to be the most telling evidence for you to proving the controlled demolition of the buildings?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, I'm not an expert. I'm just a layperson. I'm just an American citizen, and I'm looking at this thing. Building 7, of course, is very, very telling because of its free fall, virtual free fall, in near perfect symmetry into its own footprint. You don't have to be an expert to look at that building come down and say, that is defying the laws of physics. It doesn't make sense to come down that way against tens of thousands of tons of steel and concrete. It's just not logical. And the way that the towers are exploding, as Richard described, exploding outward, that's not a building collapsing. And it's to me, it's phenomenal how easily, really, it is to fool a lot of the people with a lie or a misrepresentation that is told over and over and over and over and over again, which the media did. I myself am particularly interested in the nanothermite science because, to me, I look at this and say, wow, an international team of 9 scientists and researchers have documented in a peer-reviewed paper that nanothermite is in the dust of 9/11. And to my way of thinking, that is in and of itself cause for another investigation. So that's a paper that myself and an attorney who worked pro bono to help me in D.C. at the close of my track, David Meiswinkle. I submitted that document and another document which documents carbon nanotubes in the lungs of first responders. It's nothing conclusive, but it's something that can be considered supportive to the nanothermite documentation. And then also I submitted to the FBI in this complaint a copy of the film 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, which Rena Patty and I, across the United States, gave a copy of to firefighters and police chiefs, fire chiefs, academics, and students and lots of American people. Gave a copy of that film to, and people were very receptive.
Absolutely, and I'm amazed still that you did that, and I said it last week, I'll say it again, it's almost like you guys are going to be folk heroes someday, like a Paul Bunyan type. People will tell the story of how you guys rode across the country to spread this evidence. Now, I played the clips earlier. First off, there was C-SPAN, and then later I played Neil Conan at NPR. Now, first Richard and then Pam, do you have any comments or reaction to what you heard?
Well, I'm quite concerned that one of the leading talk show hosts in the country has cut off the dialogue immediately, prematurely, and even when the caller was citing the 1900 architects and engineers who are calling for a new investigation. These are not conspiracy theorists. These are technical and building professionals who are simply calling out the forensic evidence found at the crime scene. This deserves to be looked at fairly and squarely on major talk shows, as opposed to being dismissed as conspiracy theorists or something. It is so difficult for most people, I guess, to face the possibility that 9/11 could be something other than what we were told, some sort of an inside operation, that it is automatically, categorically, systematically denied as conspiracy theorists, that we can't even look at the evidence because of the dangers to our psyche.
It is amazing, and I listen to people talk about this topic, and I hear people, the gatekeepers, the customer service of America. That's what I call them. They're not here to help you, folks. They're here to handle you, to herd you towards whatever wedge issue that it's safe for you to debate about. But I see them dismiss it and marginalize it as conspiracy theory. I hear your ordinary person completely turn off. They say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about politics." I reiterate, it's not politics, folks. It's a murder investigation. Two different things here. All right, but regardless, okay, it's the biggest mass murder in U.S. history. Don't you think that we should have a better understanding of it? And this, even if you don't want to believe that there were certain forces involved, even if you want to believe the official story, why would you not have a new investigation into this? First of all, to answer the questions that are really tearing this country apart, because it is undermining the agendas of what the people in power are trying to do right now. Okay, and that's what we're succeeding at doing. So if you want to cut the legs out from under it, have the new investigation. I've said that before on the show. I'm saying it again. Okay, but to also have a better understanding of how not to have this happen again. And folks, Building 7, I think Richard would agree, would be one of the greatest structural failures in history. And think about this: a 47-story high-rise is suffering random fires, just completely collapsing. There's no precedent for that. And this is a very dangerous world that National Institute of Standards and Technology lives in, where a fire can break out randomly or throughout a building and the whole building just falls down in your head. Okay, I don't want to live in the world that they live in. So if they really believe that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, then they need to get to the bottom of that and investigate how do we not have that happen. And there's been no changes in building codes as a result of this. So, folks, for a better understanding, you need to have the new investigation. Did you have something to say, Richard?
Yeah, it turns out that you're absolutely correct. There have been no structural changes to the International Building Code as a result of the events of 9/11. And here you have, like you said, a 47-story skyscraper collapsing to the ground in 6.5 seconds due to, quote, normal office fires. Now, they do provide they attempt to provide some justification for this. They say that thermal expansion caused these beams to expand, but that couldn't have happened because those fires were out over an hour before in that area where they said these beams were expanding, and the photographic evidence shows that. And even if they could have expanded, well, they wouldn't have because they're fireproofed. But even if they weren't fireproof and could have expanded, they could not have pushed the girder off of its seat because there were shear studs tying the beams to the concrete floors above them. And this whole series of events they describe to show that the building began to cascade in on itself from the inside out could never have happened because that would have provided massive telegraphing of damage to the exterior perimeter frame, which the videos don't show whatsoever. So it's a complete lie from beginning to end. And again, anybody who looks at this, who's willing to look at this, at our website, which is ae911truth.org, where you can see Building 7 coming down right there on the main website. And you can see on the main page, you can see the evidence. You can see the 15-minute documentary narrated by Ed Asner showing the tale of this mysterious collapse. It's rather extraordinary. It's all right there for your listeners, Andy.
Right. And now, Pam, do you have any comments on what you heard, C-SPAN or NPR?
Well, again, I think it comes down to listening to people that deserve our respect and attention. So these experts are very distinguished experts. Richard is a very distinguished expert. The experts in the film 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, are very distinguished experts. And the Supreme Court judge, this honorary Supreme Court judge from Italy, he is someone who deserves our respect. He's earned the right to be listened to be paid attention to when he makes a statement. And so to have this leader in the media, cut this person off, I mean, it made me think about the Keene-Hamilton co-chairs for the Keene-Hamilton 9/11 Commission. They have both asked for another investigation. Would this person cut someone off if they were asking that question? If they were saying, these guys are asking for another investigation as well. What about that? They said they were lied to, and that there are a lot of unanswered questions. So there are a lot of people inside the fabric of our American system who are saying that we need another investigation. And my question is, why do those voices keep being squashed? Why do those voices keep being marginalized?
Right, and it's close to 2,000 now, architects and engineers who have signed the petition. And what's amazing here, and this is very telling, this is why it's important to ask politicians these questions on TV, because people look at them as if they're the wise elders on the mountain that have the answers, and they really don't. Now, there's something I didn't have time to play on the show today, and you guys may or may not have seen it in the video compilation, but C-SPAN, after they were called to the carpet by a caller for trying to deflect one Building 7 question. Earlier, there was a caller who called them out on that. The next day, they were asked by a retired Marine engineer and former person who had worked in construction about Building 7. And so it could look like Chris Smith got the go-ahead to talk about it for a few minutes. And he goes off and, he really doesn't say much. But then he says something like, well, people are always surprised by how fast they imploded. And he says something about unanswered questions. But he also says, well, and they may have cut corners on the construction. I don't know that. No, well, you don't know that. You're just throwing that out there because it sounds like it might be good to people who are asleep. So, why are people listening to these folks who really don't know what they're talking about? And I'm not pretending to be some expert here, but I am studied on the subject. And what Richard Gage says, and all of the experts speak out, makes sense, okay? It makes perfect sense. And what the other side says doesn't make sense because, again, you have to erase 8 stories from Building 7 in its fall for NIST models to work. So, again, why are people listening to these people? It's because they're on TV, okay? It's because the flickery blue box has a toehold in America and it's not letting go. People need to start thinking for themselves. And it's Independence Day tonight as people listen to this program for the first time. And there's a lot of nationalism at this time of year, of course, and we know that the other side can sometimes use their own version of patriotism to attack people who raise these questions about the 9/11 scientific evidence. So first Richard and then Pam, can you give your own thoughts on patriotism in relation to this issue we're bringing to people's attention?
Well, I know that when I realized, to my horror, that the Twin Towers were blown up and shattering in 12 seconds, the complete structure at nearly free-fall acceleration and with evidence of incendiaries, I knew that I had absolutely no other choice, that this was the most important issue in America right now, that everybody must become aware of the truth, no matter how hard it is to grasp the implications of. Everybody had to know what I knew, and that it was my duty as an American to speak that truth. And as an architect, my audience was other architects and engineers. And we've assembled now over 2,000 architects and engineers as a result of attending the AIA convention in Denver, where 14,000 architects had the opportunity to walk by our booth and get our information, see Building 7 coming down, and sign our petition. So now we have over 2,000 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation. So our patriotic duty is to go to Congress on September 11th, this coming September 11th, and present to Congress our petition demanding a new investigation. Present them the 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out DVD documentary to them. And we will have done part of our duty. We've done this before, of course, when we reached 1,000 architects and engineers. We presented our earlier DVD, 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, and a petition with 1,000 signatures. Now we're doubling that. In addition, our patriotic duty is to pull together the people in the 9/11 Truth Movement that understand that other Americans have to be aware of this in our Rethink 9/11 campaign. And so we now have a global transmedia ad campaign highlighting Building 7. It says, did you know a third tower fell on 9/11? The evidence might surprise you. Rethink911.org. So people can go to rethink911.org and help this campaign right now. That will be the response to the need of the hour for patriotism in this country on this July 4th, because once people become aware of the truth about 9/11, they begin to become aware of a lot of other things that we have not been told by the media, by our government, that are going on right under our noses and above our heads and behind our backs. So it's extremely important that 9/11 being so obviously a false flag operation, which implies that this was an attack on Americans, but by somebody other than, obviously, fundamentalist hijackers from Muslim countries, because somebody would have had to have access to these three buildings. It blows the roof off of this myth, and Americans have to become kind of have the wool pulled off of their eyes, if you will, and awaken to the reality of 9/11 as it really is, and other realities as they really are. It's a painful awakening, but a critically important one for every American. And why not start today on July 4th?
Pam, your thoughts on 9/11 truth and patriotism?
Yeah, well, it's July 4th, and for me, what this means, what this day is about, is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we have lost a great deal of these liberties and freedoms. And to me, having those in place is the light for the rest of the world to get those in place, and now we don't even have them. And I think that's a real problem, because it's 9/11 that's being used as an excuse. Back in May, the military granted itself the power to police our streets without local or state consent. That's an article that can be read on Truth Out by Jed Morey. The Obama Pentagon has also in May, they declared on the Senate floor that using the authorization for use of military force can be enacted anywhere in the world, including the homeland. That's it. They can do whatever they want. They're using 9/11 as an excuse for this. The Patriot Act, indefinite detention of anyone in the world, including Americans, that's the law right now. It's being fought in the courts, but right now that's legal. There's no due process of law, no lawyer. These kinds of things we as Americans have to look. It's our responsibility to look at them. It's our responsibility to recognize this. We have to become active. We have to become vocal. All of these things, drone strikes, the illegal wars, everything that the peace and social justice community is impassioned about, all comes back to 9/11. It all comes back to this incredibly flawed official story that thousands and thousands of experts are challenging based on hard science and forensic evidence. So yes, I'm very happy and grateful to be working for the Rethink 9/11 campaign that Richard brought up. And this is going to awaken millions and millions of people. It's the major ad campaign around the world throughout the month of September, throughout the 12th anniversary. There's going to be a 54-foot high billboard in Times Square, seen by nearly 1 million people a day throughout September. This kind of thing, I mean, go to that website and support it, because we need to wake people up to the hard science of what happened on 9/11. You have to face these dark truths in order to turn things around.
Right, and I'm going to weigh in with my own 2 cents on this issue here, and I think the problem as I see it is a lot of people relate their government, or just individual members of their government, whether it be the president, vice president, people at NIST, is somehow representing all of America, somehow representing them, as if they're an extension of them. And I've asked this question before. I mean, if somebody who works at for the government as a census taker were to, if you found out that they had murdered somebody, would you be crying that it's horrible to accuse them if the evidence is so clear? Okay, why don't we have that same kind of mentality when we look at other people in positions of power? And I've come to the point where I've gotten less sentimental, and I guess I've had to do that because I've had this nationalism. I don't even call it patriotism, what the other side does. I call it nationalism, crammed down my throat for the past 11 years and used against me. To this point, I just kind of look at the country as being two different countries, and it's not good, it's not bad. It just exists. It's just something that we live in. Okay, and people think that exposing the truth about what really happened in this mass murder, and that's what it is, folks. It's not politics. It's a mass murder investigation. People think that exposing the truth about what happened would somehow be hurtful to our country, so they don't want to go there. But I ask this, how is it going to be hurtful to you personally? All right, you think that George Bush is America. You think that Dick Cheney is America. You think that the people of the National Institute of Standards and Technology is America. No, it's not. It's you. Okay, America is a lot more than just who is president at a given time or what wars we've won. Okay, America is culture. America is the people in it, and it's a collective of different personalities, and that's what it is, folks. And I think that if you want to look in terms of the country, exposing what really happened on that day in what would be a relatively short period of time in history, if you look at it from a big picture perspective, would be one of the best things that could happen to this country. Think about the impact that would have on the future, because if the American people actually got together and exposed this and brought down this big lie, future leaders, future people in government would look at this for the next 100, 200 years and be afraid of ever trying anything like it again. And what a great story for the spirit of America about how people can overcome something like this, can acknowledge this kind of wrong. I think it would make us a stronger nation, and that would actually bring me back to a more patriotic mindset. And right now, I'm kind of medium. I don't want to call it cynical, but at this point, I'm kind of sick of hearing about it. I'm kind of sick of having the flag waved in my face every time I question this event. And so this is my America. People like Richard Gage, people like Pam Senzee, I consider them more my countrymen. Even people in other countries like Tony Rook, and I said this when he was on the program, I look at him more as a countryman than I would someone like Dick Cheney, as someone like even Barack Obama. All right, I consider him more part of the nation that I live in, nation of free-thinking, free people who are unafraid to speak their minds and tell the truth. He's more my countryman than these people who claim to represent America, because they don't. It's not the America that I stand for, those people. So, for each of you, you're obviously, 11 years later, we're still going strong. There's something that's got to be driving you, some kind of thing that you find hope in. So, same order, Richard, then Pam, what gives you hope in this fight? Do you have any stories, examples, something that you see as, a glimmer of hope for the future, that this issue will continue on and that this will be exposed?
Yeah, Andy, half of the architects who stopped by our booth were aghast when they saw Building 7 coming down in front of their faces, and they realized that their organization, the American Institute of Architects, was telling them that that building, which comes down uniformly, symmetrically, free fall acceleration, straight down into its own footprint almost, was brought down by normal office fires. In that moment, they got that they were lied to. Many of them signed our petition right then and there. That's what gives me hope, because we did this 3 or 4 years ago in San Francisco at the American Institute of Architects. It was very difficult to get any of the architects to stop. And this is the experience of people out on the street as well. They are saying that at least half the people are receptive and inquiring and engaging and open to the evidence and have heard something already from other places and wanting to, delighted to have the opportunity to hear what might the truth be. So this is a shift in the public consciousness. I liken it to this filling of a swimming pool. If you just keep checking it every hour, it doesn't look like there's any progress, and it can be frustrating for those of us who are actively engaged in the truth, the pursuit, the education of the public every day. But when you check that pool, every week or every however, once a day, you can really see the progress. So after 6 years or 7 years now of my engagement, I'm really seeing a lot of difference out there. And yet, no, it's not in the media. No, it's not by government officials. But there is the general unconsciousness of the public becoming more conscious. I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know when we get our big break. I don't know what it's going to take, but I do know that it's changing and that I can't stop. And as long as we are supported as an organization and our projects like rethink911.org are supported, we have a great chance of breaking through sometime soon here.
Pam, your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. I do have hope. I wouldn't be able to go forward if I didn't. I believe in the power of truth. I believe in the human spirit. And I believe in human goodness. And I saw that across the country. It may sound a little campy, but I came across almost exclusively good people, caring people, people receptive to the science when it's presented to them, and people that cared about their country and about what's happening. So, I do believe in that. I think it's a difficult task ahead of us to educate the public and to educate other experts, as Richard is doing, and as AE911 Truth is doing. So I would encourage people to go to AE911truth.org and donate and support this organization and this vital work, to go to rethink911.org and donate to your preferred city or to the program overall, to the campaign overall, which you can do on that website as well. Support this work. Get involved and help these organizations out, because, it holds the key. As far as I'm concerned, AE911 Truth holds the key, and that's why I went across the country with Rena in order to support this organization.
Well, obviously, I have hope. That's why I keep doing this. I do this show every week, and I'm kind of at that point, like in a boxing match, where you don't even know what round it is. You just kind of keep punching, and the end will come at some point. But you're just going to keep fighting, and you're not really thinking about it anymore. It's just what you do. But what I found, though, in my own work is that a lot of things, repetitive action, activism you make a habit out of, consistency, it really has an important impact, even if you don't see the immediate results. I'm going to ask you, Richard and Pam, what's something that our listeners can do, some small thing that listeners can do every day that could help out in a great way, you think, for the AE911 Truth in this fight and its mission to expose this truth?
Well, we have a host of tools to help people to be consistent every day. We have the 9/11 Investigator, for instance, which is a newspaper, and it has the evidence laid out. Some people, won't believe anything unless it's in the news. So we have our own newspaper. We have our own book. Some people say it's not true if it's not on a book. We have our own radio show, for crying out loud, called Free Fall, and Andy Steele is the moderator of that, and it is independent, but it reflects a lot of the important critical information every week that we have been putting together for 7 years now from many other sources. We have our own brochures that people can buy by the hundreds and hand them out. We give them out basically at cost, and people can download the artwork, print it yourself, banners that can be held over freeways. There's so many different things that can be done, including lawn signs and T-shirts people can wear. Let them come up to you and ask you questions based on the content on your T-shirt. Rethink911.org, one of our T-shirts. 9/11 Explosive Evidence, one of our other T-shirts. They are topical. They're controversial. They invite. They provoke a series of questions and controversy. It's a great way to get conversations started. This is a grassroots movement, the 9/11 Truth Movement. Millions are drawn to it, and it is a great way. Well, it's the only way that change has ever been made by a group of very dedicated people, as I think Margaret Mead coined that phrase quite a while ago. We are not going to get change from our government, from our media. They seem to have sold themselves to the highest bidder, which is not the American people, unfortunately.
And Pam, in our last minute or so here, what's something you think people could do every day in helping in this mission?
Well, another thing that I do is one of the team leaders for the AE 9/11 Truth Action Group's team. So I would strongly urge people to go to the AE 9/11 Truth website and click on Take Action. And there they have a whole plethora of actions that they can take. And also they can, through that link, they can go and become a local contact or start an action group in their area. And we can help you start an action group and connect you to supporters in your area as well. So I would strongly encourage people to get involved in that grassroots community organizing and building.
You're right. And, folks, we give you the tools every week, and it's things that you come up with that are going to be the key, and it's very simple things. It could be calling into C-SPAN, very easy to do. It could be calling into your favorite radio program, very easy to do. All right. It could be just talking to a friend about the information, having loud conversations so that other people around you can hear it, speaking unapologetically. All right. You don't have to ask for permission to tell the truth. You just speak it. And then when you show that courage, other people will follow. And that is what America is about. All right. And luckily, nobody has to die in this second American Revolution for freedom to ring. All right. All you have to do is speak boldly. Speak the truth, and then we can get closer to a world where we don't have to have this issue in our lives anymore. I'm longing for the pre-9/11 world. I'm longing for a restoration of normalcy. And I guess it's not a revolution. It's a restoration of what we think America is, or what we thought America was about. But we got to do something. Well, folks, we are out of time. I want to thank Richard and Pam for coming on this program. Remember, folks, you can listen to this program every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.